Hello, hello. So good afternoon. For those who don't know, my name is Julius. I will be moderating this panel again. So I know you guys are getting hungry, but I'm sure that you could be very happy to hear what these guys have to say in the next panel. I will read for you just the outline of the panel. First of all, thank you very much for coming. So there we go. During the next hour, we'll talk about how research institutes form the idea of the cities. What is important to understand today in economy, innovations. What is important to understand in economy, innovation, ecology, sociology, to improve the quality of lives in megacities and agglomerations. So we're going to have representatives from some of the best research institutes in the world, and around the idea of factories in the agglomerations development. So I'll introduce the speakers who come onto the stage as I ask you to do that. The first speaker is going to be Hiro Ichikawa. He's a professor and executive director of the Mori Memorial Foundation. I'm very glad to have him here. I lived 3.5 years in Japan, and I am very aware of the challenges of a city like Tokyo. We'll have after that Rob Moore. I mean, if you can come to the stage. Already up? Round of applause. Nice meeting you. Rob Moore, who I've just met, is Executive Director of the Guateng City Region Observatory. We've just had Rashid here in the panel before, and then I think Rob will contribute greatly for you to understand more and more about the challenges faced by a city like Guateng, a region. Then we're going to have Alaina Harkness. She is a research fellow project on the 21st century city governance at the Brookings Institute. Thank you very much. And finally, Vicente Guallard is the head of Laboratory of Promoting Cities of the Future Shukov Lab, Higher School of Urban Studies, Higher School of Economics. Welcome on the stage. Mr. Guallard, we haven't met before, but we'll talk later again. But thank you very much for coming. So thank you all, the panelists, for coming. A round of applause for them. I think it's great to have such an incredible panel today. And we'll start with Mr. Hiro Ichikawa. Each panelist will have 10 minutes for an explanation.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to just present about 10 minutes quite quickly about what is our foundation. We have now two institutes, such as urban development and urban strategies. Today, I will explain mainly about urban strategies. Okay. There are 5 studies. Of course, we have so many now, but today I will present 5 studies. First one is a city perception survey. Second one is Tokyo Future Scenario 2035. Third one is the Power City Index. This is quite a famous one now. And also Global Power Inner City Index. And finally, one more study about urban intangible values. All of these studies based just studying about the future and the present condition of mega cities in the world. First one is a city perception survey. It's a simple study. How people think about the image of a people and the city. this only today explain about case of Tokyo now. We had a survey to world 41 cities and answers. Finally, just study about what kind of impression people has about Tokyo. Crowded, quite important topic, and technology. And we did same study for other cities, but today only explain about Tokyo. And one difference here is whenever people visited before or not, very different. The people who never came to Tokyo thinking about far, manga, stressful, pollution, noisy. Once you come to Tokyo, people can find that polite, safe, clean, organized. And some difference between other area and European countries and Asian countries. Next study is Global Power Inner City Index. This is talking about the power city in city center within 5 kilometers and 10 kilometers from city center. Several cities are about that. Then the case of New York. So many concentration in Manhattan. Tokyo, little bit different from Manhattan. Shanghai, more spread. This is the final ranking in this inner city ranking. Top city in 5 kilometers from city center is Hong Kong. Second position is just taken by Tokyo, followed by Paris. Now, this is a study we are doing about the future of Tokyo now. And target year is now 2035. And we have 3 key important point to find KP1, KP2, KP3, some difference. So finally, we have a 4 scenario, stormy, rainy, cloudy, and blue sky in the future. So stormy city, dysfunctional and declining city. Rainy cities, introverted, rundown city. Maybe better than that, cloudy, threatened veteran megacity. Finally, we are trying to get this kind of quite important harmony we call wa in Japanese, should be leading the world economy. This is another study. Okay, this study based on data mainly from the survey and just the statistical data. So in this urban intangible value, we have a different type of study now, just talking about not hardware, kind of software, such as efficiency, accuracy and speed, safety and security, and diversity, hospitality, and change and growth. So this is a pretty different type of idea from this kind of study. And these are studies we did. So just sorry about skipping now. I have only 10 minutes to say. And overall, just Tokyo, the Vienna, top and second. This is quite interesting. Tokyo is a famous megacity. Vienna is a very compact city. But in this study of urban intangible value, 2 cities has a kind of similar taste, very important topic for any megacity in the world. And I have to say, our institute, for who, for what is our role? The main important topic for us now is we have to show the important data and the future for policy makers, including mayor, governor, and also their policy makers overall. Already in case of Japan now, our prime minister used our data, also our governor of Tokyo used this data. Then finally, some comments from London on the Tokyo, and Seoul, and Amsterdam. Next time we should comment from Moscow. And I have a few minutes more. So next, the most important study we do now, it's called GPCI in the world. This is the data to measure the power of city for 42 cities in the world. This is a committee member. Saskia Sassen is already at this conference. Maybe she has a speech tomorrow. And 42 cities are covered. Several criteria to choose. Then 6 functions we are using to evaluate the power of city. Economy, research and development, cultural interaction, and livability, environment, and transportation accessibility. Finally, we can find some data about Moscow. Okay, this data shows the top 10 cities. Now top is London, followed by New York, Tokyo, and Paris. And these 10 cities are kind of, let's say, a kind of fixed city now to make some battle. So case of Moscow, now it's a 35th position. So we should know, okay, this is the only ranking. The important topic is we have to find what is good, what is wrong, what is weak, then decide next policy. So, well, just unfortunately now the power of Moscow is getting down, but no problem. Whenever a policymaker proposes some new future, you can change positions. This is a case of now London, New York, Tokyo, Paris, and Moscow. So this is a radar chart, which part is weaker. So accessibility is quite nice, but others are kind of so many, problems you have to change. Then this is the data, economy, and some other data not good, but for accessibility not bad. Economy, well, of course, Moscow has a very strong power of economy, but as a total, not necessarily good in this ranking. So finally, I have to say, strengths of Moscow. Very good, the top unemployment rate from the statistical data. I don't know the fact, but it's top in the world, okay? And total working hours. This means don't work so much. So now Moscow has the second position. Corporate tax are 4th in the world. And number of runways, the airports, you have 3 airports and not bad in the world. Research are not bad. Okay, important topic is weakness of your city. This is important information for policymakers, how to change your future. CO2 emissions. Okay, we have 42 cities, so now 40s. Whoa. Renewable energy used. And office space per desk. I doubt this data, but 41. I don't know why, but maybe something behind that. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ichikawa. So we're going to move on now to Mr. Rob Moore. And just to remind you, he's the Executive Director of the Kwarteng Region, City Region Observatory. Thank you very much for coming. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Julius. The idea that the GCRO, that is the Gauteng City Region Observatory in South Africa, the idea that it has to manufacture, to follow the theme of the presentation, is the idea of the city region itself. Up until about 15 years ago, there was no consideration of just trying to get this thing working. There was no conception of a city region in this area. There were a number of separate cities which have grown into each other. But the idea of the city region as a necessary subject for governance became apparent in the post-apartheid era. And the GCRO was set up in order to try and develop the baseline information and insights that would enable governance across a complex city region of this nature. The problematic in this particular case is that there has traditionally in South Africa, largely because of apartheid politics, been significant tension and antagonism between universities on the one hand and government on the other. And the challenge in this particular case is to find how is it possible to get scholarly research made available for the use of government in driving the city region. And the GCRO was the experiment in order to do this. And it has been set up as a partnership between government on the one hand and two universities in the Gauteng city region on the other hand. Very importantly, it's set up with core funding from provincial government, with in-kind support from the universities. It's located on the university campus, but very importantly, it is guaranteed complete, absolute academic freedom in terms of the research that it does and the publication of its results. The primary client is government, but our independence is guaranteed. And very importantly, the great majority of our work is to be made publicly available so that the data can be used in all quarters. We provide a lot of on-request policy support to government, particularly provincial government, but metropolitan government as well, and national government consults us. We do a lot of data generation, and we do more qualitative research as well. Our output is a mixture of academic, scholarly, peer-reviewed work in normal academic publications, as well as a whole range of different policy-oriented publications aimed at government, but also aimed at the wide social sphere, so that as many people as possible can access the information that we produce. The big question, though, is how a research outfit like ourselves navigates the tricky territory between academia on the one hand and government on the other. How is it that we can do honest and insightful research without falling into the trap of becoming politically positioned in one way or another in an intensely political environment? How do we tell the truth without being seen to play politics in a very, very volatile political environment? How do we satisfy both the academic, scholarly critique, and how do we satisfy the need for meaningful contributions to public policy? So let me just reflect briefly on what's transpired over the last 10 years or so. It's been very interesting is that we have found that our colleagues in government are relatively inarticulate about knowing how to ask for research support. They ask for research support more and more, but very, very often they have to leave it to us to translate what their needs are and turn that into appropriate research projects. So that means that we end up having a very high level of discretion kind of amongst ourselves around how we interpret the signals and the requests that come to us from government. We're very fortunate, I think, in our particular context, that over the last decade, there's been a very high level of political maturity on the part of our government partners, in that they have never ever asked us to not ask this question or not publish that information. We've always been given the freedom to make our data and insights publicly available, as uncomfortable as some of the insights have been. In our city region, we're still struggling with deep, deep inequalities, deep political contestation, and our data very often reveals this. We're very fortunate, though, in that we've never been asked to hold anything back. But a very important part of the relationship has been a growing trust between ourselves as researchers and our colleagues in government, in that we've got to know each other, we've got to understand each other's contexts and needs in increasingly sensitive ways, which means the quality of the work that we do as researchers is based on a greater insight into the complexity of the demands of governance, and they reciprocally understand a little bit more about what it takes to do quality, systematic research. Very, very often there's a demand for quick turnaround, and very often that's not possible if you're wanting to generate quality outputs. So the big question is, do we succeed in influencing public policy? And the answer is yes and no. The yes answer is that yes, we contribute directly to many of the frameworks that provincial and increasingly metropolitan governments are looking at. We're certainly influencing the high-level leadership, in that many of them, in their public pronouncements, in the kind of values and insights that they project, will include our insights in their speeches, etc. We play a role in helping to broker dialogue between provincial government and metropolitan government, and there's no doubt that the demand for our work is growing all the time. These are all, for us, signals of success. However, we are also continually asking ourselves whether the influence of our work manages to penetrate all the way down to street-level politics. Are we able to change the degree of xenophobia, for example, that plays out on our streets? You know, the local police force in terms of their relationships with migrants, questions like that. So we realize that we have very unequal access across different departments. Some departments are very strong partners with us. Other departments hold us at arm's length and keep us at bay. It's very clear that there's no direct linear relationship between the research insights that we provide on the one hand and public policy responses on the other. There's always a complex set of intervening variables and contextual considerations which can interfere with that relationship. And so I suppose what we really try and do is to saturate the public sphere with as much insight and data as possible, so that there's a greater chance of informed decisions being made in how we go into the future. A key study that we undertake every 2 years is a quality of life survey. It has some resemblances to the features of the presentation that we heard before. We conduct some 30,000 interviews across our city region, and we are mapping what is happening to the very, very diverse and unequal communities that are deployed across the city region. What we really want to try and understand is to what extent are the livelihoods and life chances of people changing in the post-apartheid era, given the very deep inequalities that apartheid bequeathed to us, and that those inequalities were very, very strongly ingrained in the spatial planning of the apartheid city landscapes. Okay. I think the battery's dead.
Yeah, just pushing up and over, just put it.
Hold it up.
Yeah, just going.
Yeah, whoops, there we go. So with our data, we are increasingly able to look at our city region and to map how inequality plays itself out differently in the different wards and regions of our city region. So as you can see there, the areas that are green are the areas of greatest wealth, and the areas that are red are the areas of greatest poverty and inequality. That's simply a map which is looking at income. We've developed now more complex measures of inequality, and we have here a multi-dimensional poverty index, which gives us a clearer picture of what it is that helps to maintain structural poverty in some areas, but enables some kind of mobility in other areas. We're able also to begin mapping to some extent very, very different attitudes and experiences of life. You'll see that the strong red bars on the left-hand side are signaling that there is still very, very high levels of distrust between racial groupings in the city region, in spite of the fact that there are growing levels of affluence in various areas. In some places, some very disturbingly high levels of xenophobia, of intolerance towards sexual difference, towards gender differences, etc. And so this kind of data we can begin to generate, and we can begin to spatialize it to be able to say that in these particular areas there are very, very high levels of intolerance of one kind or another, and that helps in a way for government to begin to anticipate where there might be outbreaks of particular kinds of violence.
Rob, just to, if you have to,
okay.
yeah, just 1 or 2 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay, all right. Let me skip forward then. Just amongst my last slides, Julius, this is just a reflection of the attitudes towards government, and the darker shades here indicate areas where there is deep dissatisfaction with government. The lighter areas are areas where there is greater satisfaction. Now, this was in 2009. In 2011, we began to see this deepening dissatisfaction. 2013, the picture became increasingly dark and unhappy. But very, very interestingly, in 2015, the picture began to change, and what we were seeing was that the levels of dissatisfaction were in fact being directed not at local government but at national government. And in the 2016 local government elections, we had a massive political change, and three major metros in the country were taken away from the ruling party and now handed over to the opposition, signaling a major, major sea change. Our data was showing that this was going to happen, and we've been very fortunate in being able to continue to show this work. I wanted to say something about what our outputs look like, but these are very, very available on our website. Everything is made available there, and I would invite colleagues to look more closely at our work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. I think Rob raised a very good point, is that a lot of the data that you see here is available at the respective websites and so on. So it's good for everyone to just go after here and then either try to talk to them, you know, they'll have probably some time at some point, but also to go and research further. I think those forums, the good thing is that they should be the starting point actually of a bigger conversation. So I would like to invite now Alaina Harkness. She is a research fellow for the project on 21st century city governance at the Brookings Institute. So thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So this will be a bit of a switch after hearing from two colleagues with very deep work in two particular urban areas. my work at the Brookings Institution and my team's work is we have the humbling job of trying to draw comparative conclusions across multiple city and metropolitan regions around the world. And so I say humbling because, as we all know, there are so many different dimensions along which cities differ, yet we understand that in many places so many challenges are shared, and also so many of the solutions can be exported and shared as well. So I think that is a concept familiar to many of you, but I just want to set that context. It's a bit of a different. Here's the flow of my talk. I want to share a little bit about the sort of new mode of working with cities that we are trying to pioneer in my initiative at the Brookings Institution. That's what our idea factory, that's what we're trying to, it's a process of working with cities, a very practice-focused process. I'll talk a bit about why we've chosen to focus on urban governance specifically. Of all of the different things in cities that we could look at, governance is our bullseye, our target. And then walk through a couple of case studies, just very briefly, hitting highlights. 2 cities we are looking at for their district-level approach to revitalization, and then 2 countries, actually, England and Chile, that are in the process of actual governance change right now in real time, which is something we're interested in tracking. So that's the scope of my presentation. So just a bit of framing. I think you heard this morning in the opening plenary a quite compelling case made that cities are very complex systems and that our challenges are complex and interconnected. Our main concern from the Brookings, my team's Brookings perspective, is that the planning and the finance and the governance of cities, the sort of mechanics of making cities go, they are not up to that task of functioning as sort of very complex systems. They are linear bureaucracies, they are organized vertically. It is very difficult in practice to make the kinds of connections that the speakers this morning talked about so compellingly. We know we need this, yet it is challenging. So our initiative, in tiny font here, this is our homepage, is called the Centennial Scholar Initiative. And it was launched as part of Brookings' 100th anniversary. Brookings is a 100-year-old policy research institute. It's one of the oldest in the United States. And it has worked in some ways like a traditional university with very distinct divisions between our global program, our foreign policy program. And what the Centennial Scholar Initiative set out to do is try to break down some of those divisions inside Brookings, between the areas that have deep expertise to bring to bear on urban challenges, but also inside cities themselves. So it is an explicitly interdisciplinary initiative. We try to build connections across different domains of practice, but we are also interested in building connections between scholars, civic NGOs, public sector representatives. So many of the same challenges you spoke to so clearly about trying to translate, create common language, help to facilitate a stronger sort of client relationship. Those are very common and shared in our experience as well. And we are really focusing at trying to sort of do that work better to deliver results that are crisp and sharp and usable by the public sector, because ultimately we are focused on having impact in cities. That is our goal. So these powers to plan, to finance, and govern, we think of as sort of this holy trinity, or the 3 most important things we need to help cities to do well. And I'm going to focus really on the finance and the governance piece of this in the case studies today, but planning is something as well that is obviously critical, and other experts here will speak to more clearly. Generally across these 3, weak and fragmented city powers are a persistent problem. So I don't need to read all of these in detail, but some of the highlights, overlapping jurisdictions. So this idea that regions are what exist on the ground, but they are very difficult to govern, and we don't necessarily have political boundaries that are matched to the scale of the social organization of the city. In the finance sector, very uneven effectiveness of public sector investments, few instruments that permit the kind of blended return we want to see across domains. So if we put in a transit network, what does that do for climate? What does that do to address social inequality? All of those things, but it's very difficult to measure that impact in terms of a benefit-cost analysis that makes the benefit of that infrastructure clear. On the governance side, the persistent multi-level governance challenge of connecting across the nation, the state, the region, the municipality, even sub-organizations within the municipality of neighborhoods and individuals. That is a persistent challenge. And then the horizontal coordination across all of these different domains that we know are interacting: housing, transport, climate. So all of these things, this background of sort of fragmentation, is one of the things we're trying to understand and map the commonalities, how cities are grappling with this, and then think of solutions with cities that are helping to make this easier to address. So some of the correctives, in a highly simplified, stylized view: building capacity within each of these sectors to think this way and to work this way, and broadly, in keeping with the theme of this morning's plenary, to increase connectivity between them. So we have a very special focus on the kinds of key institutions and intermediaries whose sole purpose is to make those connections and to build those connections. So I'm sitting here on a panel with many of the institutions that are sort of trying to work in that mode, but we are also actively interested in studying those kinds of institutions and intermediaries in other cities all around the world, because some of their key features, the kinds of ways that they innovate and work together, we can learn a lot from those kinds of intermediaries. And so we are trying to work deeply with them, understand how they function, understand what their roles are with respect to the other key players inside of their cities. Connecting information. So this is something we are interested in, understanding how data, and this role of data on this panel has been quite clear, in informing and setting a ground baseline for discussion and for setting the table for collaborative conversations. We think of connections in terms of capital. So understanding how new financial instruments and tools can be created that help to blend and invest capital in the needs that cities have, the greatest needs that cities have. And then we have this general interest in building networks of ideas and leaders who are sharing these practices and spreading them. So then I was asked to talk a bit about the sort of networked governance theory, and I think it has resonated here in a number of different ways, but here are some sort of touchstones for us. The London School of Economics has a new urban governance research project that is showing how all of these different actors, trying to map the networks of civic, private, and public actors that are engaged in things like powering London's transport system or powering New York's transport system. And they are engaged in a network analysis to try to understand how do these players work together and what is the impact that that actually can bring to bear in different ways on different cities. Bruce Katz, who runs the Centennial Scholar Initiative at Brookings, is putting out a book this summer called The New Localism that is focused on how cities are using this networked governance approach of brokering relationships across the civic, public, and private sector to get things done in cities. This is important for us in the United States context because we are in an environment where our federal government is not up to the task of dealing with cities. And this has been a challenging dynamic in the United States for some time. And so we are trying to understand how are cities coming up with ways to address their needs in partnership with, but also sometimes, unfortunately, in the absence of the resources that we need from the federal government. So that's the framework for that book. I point you to that. And there are various other networks, the GovLab in New York, that are thinking about this networked approach to governance and what it means. But broadly, it's understanding how multi-sectors can coordinate more effectively to deliver the needs of cities. So to move to the case study approach, because network governance is quite abstract, but to bring it to ground, we are trying to understand how the civic, public, and private sectors work together in particular places with particular results. And so the picture in front of you is of Copenhagen, and it's the Copenhagen Port and Harbor company in the Orestad redevelopment. And the thing that's of greatest interest to us here is how a publicly owned but privately managed corporation has been deployed for the regeneration of this harbor. It has helped to bundle assets in a way that has allowed the city to reinvest in things like transportation networks, affordable housing, a much broader array of goods and services for the city with a very long-range plan in place. And so this is a model that Brookings has just produced a case study of the Copenhagen Port and Harbor Corporation that's available on our website. And it's really trying to get behind the outcomes to the process design, the institutional design of how this happened. This is Lyon in France. The Lyon Confluence district is also another large urban revitalization project at the district level. It is similar to Copenhagen, facilitated by the deployment of a publicly owned, privately managed entity, the SPL Lyon Confluence. And this institution and intermediary is quite important because it allows public sector sort of accountability and transparency and goal setting for this project, which includes 25% of the housing must be affordable housing. It includes goals around transportation redevelopment, but it also allows them to blend that capital and reinvest it with private sources of finance. So it is a way of trying to bundle and leverage funding, but also ensure that public sector goals are met. So we are trying to understand what are the similarities and differences between these kinds of publicly owned and privately managed corporations in the revitalization of these district level projects. And while Copenhagen in Denmark and Lyon in France have very different governing contexts, there are similarities in the structure of these particular kinds of intermediaries that we are trying to understand and describe and document. The next two examples I have focus on, so a more sort of abstract layer of governance change is happening, but we'll have very concrete and clear results on the ground. So in England, the June elections have been on everyone's mind, but even before that, in May, 6 new mayors of metropolitan regions were elected for the very first time. So there's a brand new level of government in England, and the government will be, these are heading combined authorities, so it's both devolving power from a very centralized central government down to the metropolitan level, but it is also a regional play to give power to combined authorities that speak for the broader needs of regional planning, of transportation and housing and social services. So this is a fascinating, live, real-time experiment in metropolitan governance shift and evolution. And this is the sort of thing that we, from our perch in Washington, are trying to understand, describe, document. How is it working? What kinds of capacities need to be built in the new institutions and leaders that are going to be running these new combined authorities? So it's a fascinating topic, and this is something we have been watching quite closely. Similarly, I've just come back from Santiago in Chile. Chile is in the middle right now of a similar process of devolving power to its metropolitan regions, and they are having live, real-time discussions about what kinds of powers and authorities should be transferred from the central government to these metropolitan regions. And the fascinating thing about this example is this was a governance shift propelled by an environmental challenge. It was propelled by the need to address Santiago's air quality, and also the deep divisions and inequality within the city and spatial patterns of development that have meant that development has really been pulled to the northeast of the city when the majority of the population lives in the south and the west. And so they really need a more regional approach to be able to deal with planning for transportation and for housing. And so this conversation is live, real time, and fascinating that in a place as different as places as different as Chile and in England, this same sort of need to empower metropolitan regions is happening. And so we want to facilitate shared learnings across these places and help them think about how to make this a little more fluid and high impact. So I will leave it there.
Just don't want to bother you. So if you can you wrap up in another minute? Or so?
I'm done.
You done? Oh my God!
I was done.
Oh.
I was done.
No, sorry.
So I was going to say I leave you here.
I was looking at you, not at the.
No, I leave you here with. This is just that was my home city of Chicago. That's all. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Elena. Sorry for the. So we have now the pleasure of having Vicente Gallard. Just to remind you guys, he's the head of laboratory of prototyping cities of the future at the Shukov Lab, Higher School of Urban Studies and Higher School of Economics. So thank you very much for coming, Vicente, and we look forward to seeing your presentation.
So, good afternoon. Thank you again for the invitation to the Moscow Urban Forum that is becoming really an important event in in these kind of events around the world. As you may know, I have a very strange background because I have been in the three sides of the game. I have been the chief architect of the city of Barcelona during 4 years. I am acting as an architect doing projects in different parts around the world, but also I was the founder of the Institute for Advanced Architecture in Catalonia 15 years ago, and now I am working in the Higher School of Economics in a new trend where schools traditionally related with social science, like the London School of Economics, New York University, Pompeu Fabra, are entering in the discussion and in the project of the city. Today, what I would like to talk is mostly about how to educate the people that are going, or they should be doing, what has been described before, and many other things. Because we start education platforms in Spain, and now here I would like to share some 6 principles, I say, for advanced education. So which kind of education we should make for our young people in order that they will be able to deal with the challenge of the future. Part of what I learned in the working in the city council is that many times we don't have the right people in the right place, and the people doesn't have the skills and the knowledge that we need right now. If we are in a moment of change in the world with the digital technologies, the global warming and the CO2 emissions challenge, this was out of the agenda 15 years ago, and many people that are in crucial positions in government, in companies, they don't have the right skills. So just to focus 6 principles for advanced education. The first idea will be how we educate. And I would like to show the 4 different types of education. The first one is the design class. This is where I study. You work at home, you have a professor, you show something, the professor say, quite good or quite bad, you go home, you start to work, and back and forth. The second model is the idea that the people work together. The design studio in Harvard, they start this idea of putting all the students together, drawing together, but basically the people, what they do is to study. The third model is the idea of the design lab, where the people not only are drawing, but they are making things. So, and this is where we are now. So the idea that what we should learn is not only about drawing things, but about making things with experimenting what we are doing. And the fourth level, and I am working now in a project like this in Barcelona, is the idea that you live in the environment where you learn in the environment that you are planning for others. So that means that you live in an immersive education. So that's why in Barcelona we create a place like this. We were inspired very much by the Media Lab at MIT, founded by Nicolás Negroponte, by the Bauhaus, that was another place for experimentation. So we like to think on this education in a place where you can break something and nothing happens somehow. In a place where what you are doing is not only saying what you would like to do, but doing by yourself and testing with your hands. So the funny thing is that when I was invited to Moscow, they offered me a place like this in the center of the city, and I got a depression for a week because this was not the place that I was imagining. But then I start to act as an architect. An architect, sometimes we demolish things, and what we discover is that behind this kind of traditional educational class, there was a space like this. So what we discover, an incredible, beautiful, old architecture, and what we have created in the Shuhov Lab, that in fact is in the main facility for the High School of Economics, is a laboratory full of machines, full of good people, and open, you see, to the street where the people can see what we do, and we have in fact a Starbucks in front of us. The second The second principle is about learning by doing. So again, the idea is not that we learn some theory that may we apply or we'll try to explain other people what to do. What we want to do is that the people learn to make things directly with their hands, and then the idea is that you not only draw, but you also make. So that means that the background you will see now, people need to learn many different things in order to be able to make things, because things in general, the things that we do, cities are super complex structures. So that's why people are able to learn to fabrication, to electronics, and also people are learning about how to communicate with other people and how to engage the social discussions that are fundamental in order to transform the cities and the society. The third concept is the idea of the skill trees. So is this idea that traditionally education has been oriented to for the specialization of people. University means uni, one versus. So you learn one thing and then you will be a specialist on that. And what we need today in the society are people that are able to talk with other people. So that means that you have basic knowledge about other knowledge, and also you have a very transversal approach about doing any kind of thing. So that's why in the new master program we are launching, Prototyping Future Cities, people will be learning many different things, from drawing, energy, big data, statistics, economy, law. So a very, let's say, broad, let's say, background that when you mix, you may produce a city. And then obviously there are today, this is related with software or with specific platforms that has the knowledge concentrated and allow the people to have interaction with them. So that's why the education to make cities should be oriented about doing many different things with different backgrounds and mixing different knowledge. The fourth element is the idea of the content, the multidisciplinary projects. So this is what we are trying to teach. I was educated in a traditional school of architecture, but I was working during many years with technology, and also what we learned working in the city council was that if you are not able to understand, so the biggest problem about the projects is not the project itself, is the management. And many times what we are thinking for the cities are illegal. So you need to do a regulation in order to make it possible. And then you need to explain a business model for these new ideas. For example, driverless cars. Today are illegal, they don't have a business model, and the best thing we can do is to try to imagine the future and to understand how to make it possible. So that's why we like to think that the people should learn about city and about technology, but also about social science, and what we want to do is to have a project-oriented education. So here are some samples of projects we did in Barcelona. We did one of the first free Wi-Fi network in the city. In the same way that we have lighting in all the streets, in all our cities, we should have Wi-Fi as a public right, as a civic right. And here you see the cylinder we developed as a prototype, and now we are extended all over the city, integrating other sensors and other technological elements. We also were working, another level is how to make the place where we live, how to make housing, and how to make self-sufficient housing that are producing energy. So here in Barcelona we developed this prototype of the solar house, and with the students we make a house. We make a house that was able to produce the energy, and this is the kind of buildings we need for the future of our cities. And obviously as chief architect I was making drawings for the city and trying to imagine in a bigger scale how cities should be planned for the future. And then we were doing, in our mandate, we invest more than €1 billion in 4 years in order to do urban transformations. So that means that when you work in a city, you need to be able to discuss about electronics, camera and Wi-Fi, about material fabrication and construction, and about a planning, organization, and let's say organization of the city itself. The fifth element is about the network education. So you can never pay the best specialist that you want in order to educate your people. The best thing you can do is to try to have the best people as you have. In fact, we have some of the professors of the master are here, but what we learn also working with our friends from Fab Lab Network and MIT is the idea of the distributed education. So 2 days ago, we had in our lab, in the Shuhop lab, here we invite 4 experts from LA, Lima, London and Barcelona to connect, and then our students have the opportunity to discuss and to listen different experts that somehow we share some common ideas. So the idea that education is not about one professor and 100 students, but it's about living connected to the world and trying to talk to everyone to learn everything is what we are doing, let's say. And the last thing is that education is forever. So we need to be connected, we need to be learning from the network, and that's why part of our work is to learn from anyone. The mayor of Moscow said this morning in Barcelona we were developing this idea of the city anatomy in order to develop shared language between all the different cities and talking about things in the proper way. So the idea of defining some kind of standards, we saw from Tokyo some way to talk about indicators I think is fundamental, because we can try to describe and to discuss about similar things in different places. Obviously, another fundamental platform are mayors and our research. Before was described some platforms. Today, C40 is a very important platform. The mayor of Moscow, I know, is very much also involved and interested in that. And I think that to be able to connect and to learn from others is something fundamental. And the last image I would like to show is the idea of how we discuss about the future. I was invited by the Bloomberg philanthropists 2 months ago to New York. They were inviting cities and experts to discuss about the self-driving cars, because one of the challenges for cities is that companies are faster than cities to make innovation. And this is the drama for Airbnb and Uber, that they are illegal in Spain, by the way, because no one was expecting them. And the transformation in the prices of rental is really making a big impact, at least in some touristic cities like in Barcelona. So the idea of discussing the future before it happens is fundamental. Everyone is talking about tactical urbanism and about making things real and not doing long-term plans. Yes, that is true. But if you are not able to discuss in the right way about the middle-term future, then you will have many others, Uber and Airbnb, happening. So that's why we are launching, we are in Russia. Almost everyone that I know has a grandfather that used to make rockets or to fly things. So that's why this discussion about how to discuss about cities when things start to fly with drones for delivery of flying cars or Hoovers is something relevant. And from Shuhop Lab, we launched this competition that you are, especially young people, but anyone is, is open to participate. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicente. I think, first of all, I'd like you guys to have a round of applause for all the panel here. I mean, I think I'm blown away. And I think what Vicente did, which is really good, I have to speak, I think, closer, is that you made like the perfect, actually, talk for the next one. And I hope you stay here to watch the next one. I won't be here because I need to have lunch, but you don't need. You should stay here and see the next one. You can have just a glass of water, which is about the spatial philosophy of technological corporations. And leading architects and consultants will be speaking about goals of the corporations that work on the innovation, office spaces, and how IT projects can become significant in the architectural history of the megacities. So I think you guys just made the perfect, let's say talks. Yep.
Well, before finishing, just I had one comment about our research. It should be open every time, so you can access to Mori Memorial Foundation. Today, I have no time to say everything, but you can find more data. Mori Memorial Foundation.
Fantastic. So thank you very much to everyone. And I'll just have a little rest, but I'll be here. I'll be back here very soon again for other two panels. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julie.